The obsidian walls of the high council chamber of the Zalarthian Dominion seemed to absorb the very light of the stars that burned outside the panoramic viewports, drinking in the luminescence of the galaxy, and returning only a cold, reflective silence that mirrored the tension in the room. This was the Hall of Whispers, a place where the fate of star systems was decided not with the thunder of cannons, but with the quiet scratching of styluses and the heavy, resonating hum of gravity drives shifting in the void. High Exarch Valen stood at the center of the dais, his 4 optical sensors narrowing as they focused on the holographic projection hovering above the central table, a projection of a small, insignificant blue planet orbiting a yellow dwarf star in the neglected backwaters of the spiral arm. To his left and right sat the elders of the Dominion, their chitinous armor adorned with the ceremonial sashes of their lineages, their mandibles clicking in a slow, rhythmic cadence that betrayed their anxiety. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating, laden with the weight of a history that had been buried for 10,000 cycles, a history that had suddenly, violently, clawed its way back to the surface of their collective consciousness. They were not here to discuss trade routes or border disputes. They were here because a ghost had spoken. "It is confirmed," Valen said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor plates, commanding the attention of every dignitary in the vast, circular hall. "The signal is authentic. The encryption keys match the lineage of the Ethelgard, the lost flagship of the Third Expansion Fleet. It has not been destroyed. It has not been atomized by the crushing gravity of a singularity. It is there." He gestured a clawed hand toward the spinning hologram of Earth. Resting on the surface of this localized dirt ball, occupied by a species that has barely mastered the combustion engine when we last updated our stellar charts, the Ethelgard survives. A ripple of murmurs, sounding like dry leaves skittering over stone, passed through the council. The Ethelgard was not merely a ship. It was a relic of the Golden Epoch, a vessel of such technological magnitude that its loss had precipitated the decline of the Third Expansion. It carried the Singularity Drive, a piece of technology that the Dominion had lost the ability to replicate, a power source capable of folding spacetime with a precision that modern vessels could only dream of. For millennia, it was believed to have been lost to the void, swallowed by a rogue anomaly. To find it now, intact, on a planet inhabited by primitives, was a revelation that brought with it a paralyzing fear. Counselor Etheria, a slender and elderly representative of the scientific caste, leaned forward, her carapace shimmering with the iridescent oils of high office. "If the ship is intact," she began, her voice tremulous, sharp with the edge of panic, "then the primitives have had access to it. For how long, Exarch? How long has the Ethelgard lain upon their soil?" Valen hesitated, the data scrolling across his retinal display painting a grim picture. Based on the geological strata visible in the distress pulse's background radiation, approximately 12,000 of their local years. The ship crashed during their Stone Age. It has been there through their rise, their wars, their industrialization. It has been a silent monument on their world for the entirety of their recorded history. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier than the hull of a dreadnought. 12,000 years. A species as volatile, as fractious, and as primitive as humanity having access to the zenith of Zalarthian engineering for 12,000 years. The implications were catastrophic. If they had breached the hull, if they had accessed the core, if they had even scratched the surface of the weapon systems, they could be a threat not just to themselves, but to the stability of the entire sector. "They are savages," spat General Kael'thas, his massive frame shifting in his seat, the servo motors of his battle plate whining softly. "I have reviewed the monitoring buoys we placed in that sector 3 centuries ago. They war over resources. They burn their own atmosphere. They are divided by imaginary lines on maps. If they have the Ethelgard, they have likely worshipped it as a god or stripped it for metal to build their crude projectile weapons. They cannot possibly understand what they possess. But if they have triggered the beacon, it means they are meddling with systems they cannot control. We cannot allow a species that still burns fossil fuels to possess a singularity drive. It is like handing a plasma grenade to an infant." Kael'thas slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "We must mobilize the armada. We must retrieve the ship. And if they resist, if they have desecrated the hull, we must excise them from the surface. The technology is too valuable, and the risk of a containment breach too high. We are preparing for war, not diplomacy." Valen looked at the general, then back at the hologram. He was a warrior by caste, bred for the void battle, but he possessed a prudence that Kael'thas lacked. "War is the likely outcome," Valen conceded, "but do not underestimate the variable of time. 12,000 years is a long time to study a puzzle, even for a primitive mind. We do not know what they have learned. We do not know if the beacon was triggered by accident or by design. The fleet will launch. We will bring the might of the Dominion to the edge of their system. But we will not fire until we have visual confirmation of the ship's status. We are retrieving our heritage, Kael'thos. We are not butchers, unless they make us so. The decision was made. The High Council authorized the mobilization of the 7th Interstellar Wing, a force capable of cracking planetary crusts and boiling oceans. The Leviathans of the Void, ships miles long and bristling with energy projectors, began to wake from their slumber in the orbital shipyards of Xylarth Prime. The engines ignited, burning with the fury of trapped stars, and the fleet turned its gaze toward the small, unsuspecting yellow sun in the distance. They were coming for their property. They were coming to correct a mistake of history. And they were bringing the fire of the gods to ensure that the primitives of Earth surrendered what did not belong to them. The journey through the subspace corridors was a tense, silent affair. For weeks, the Xylarthian fleet moved through the tier in reality, the swirl of exotic energies washing over their shields. Inside the command deck of the flagship, the Sovereign's Will, Valen stood watch, his eyes fixed on the navigational readouts. He spent the time studying the human file. The data was fragmentary, pieced together from long-range observations and intercepted radio leakage. He watched their history unfold in fast-forward. Empires rising and falling, the slow crawl from mud huts to steel skyscrapers, the explosion of the atomic age, the tentative steps onto their own moon. They were a frantic, noisy, chaotic species. They screamed into the void, broadcasting their music, their wars, their fears. But curiously, in the last 2 centuries, they had gone quiet. The radio leakage had tightened, becoming encrypted, directed, efficient. They had stopped screaming and started whispering. This change unsettled Valen more than the wars. Silence in a young species usually meant they were hiding or they were hunting. When the fleet finally breached the perimeter of the Sol system, dropping out of warp speed just beyond the orbit of the gas giant Neptune, they expected to be met with a chaotic scramble of primitive defenses. They expected panic. They expected frantic hails on open channels. Instead, they were met with a stillness that was almost unnatural. The sensors swept the system, painting a picture of the planetary arrangement. There were mining outposts on the moons of Jupiter, automated, efficient, silent. There were orbital habitats around Mars, glowing softly against the red dust, but there were no fleets, no swarms of attack fighters, no minefields. The space between the planets was open, clear, inviting. "It is a trap," Kael'thos growled from the tactical station, his claws digging into the controls. "They are hiding in the shadow of the planets. They are waiting for us to enter deep gravity wells." "Scan for the Ethelgard," Valen ordered, ignoring the general's paranoia. "Locate the beacon." The sensor officer, a young drone with trembling mandibles, worked the console. "Signal localized, high exarch. It is emanating from the 3rd planet, Earth, northern hemisphere. Coordinates correspond to a tectonic plate boundary, a frozen wasteland. The signal is strong. It is rhythmic." Valen frowned. Rhythmic. A distress beacon should be a constant shriek or a decaying pulse. A rhythm implied control. "Hail them," Valen commanded. "Broad spectrum, open channel. Tell them who we are. Tell them we have come for what is ours. Give them one chance to surrender the vessel before we enter orbit." The communications officer opened the channel, broadcasting the message of the Dominion in every known human language, a thunderous declaration of intent that would override every screen and speaker on their world. "Inhabitants of Earth, we are the Xylarthian Dominion. You are in possession of Dominion property, the starship Ethelgard. We have arrived to retrieve it. Do not resist. Do not attempt to access the ship systems. Surrender control immediately or face the annihilation of your military infrastructure." The message went out, traveling at the speed of light toward the blue marble. The bridge crew waited. Seconds turned into minutes. The delay was expected due to light lag, but the silence that followed the expected response window stretched on. The response came. It did not come as a jagged audio file or a grainy video feed. It appeared as a holographic projection directly on the bridge of the Sovereign's Will, bypassing their firewalls with an ease that caused the security stations to flash red warning lights. A human figure materialized in the center of the command deck. She was tall for her kind, wearing a uniform of deep charcoal gray, unadorned by medals but cut with precision. Her hair was silver, pulled back severely, and her face was lined with age and a calm, terrifying stoicism. She did not look like a savage. She did not look afraid. She looked at Valen, her eyes meeting his optical sensors with a directness that no primitive should possess. "High Exarch Valen." the human said, her voice clear, translated perfectly by the ship's computer, carrying the nuances of the high Zalarthian court dialect. I am Admiral Solara Vance of the Terran Custodial Authority. We received your message. We have been expecting you. The Ethel Guard, or as we call her, the Sleeper, is ready for inspection. We have cleared a landing vector for you. Please bring your command staff. Leave your weapons in orbit. You will not need them. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. Kael'thas was the first to speak, his voice rising in disbelief. They hacked our internal projectors? How? Our encryption is quantum-shifted. They shouldn't even be able to perceive our carrier wave. Valen stared at the empty space where the woman had stood. They didn't just hack us, he murmured, a cold chill running through his circulatory fluid. They knew my name, they knew my rank, they spoke High Court Zalarthian, a dialect not used in open transmission for 4,000 years. He turned to the tactical display. The vector they sent, is it valid? The navigator checked. It is a direct path to the signal source. It bypasses their orbital traffic, it is. A perfectly calculated descent corridor. Valen made a decision that defied all military doctrine. Stand down the weapons, keep the fleet at high alert, but hold fire. General Kael'thas, Counselor Etheria, you are with me. We are going down. The descent to Earth was surreal. As the shuttle pierced the atmosphere, the alien dignitaries looked out at the world below. They passed over sprawling cities that glowed with clean white light, connected by maglev trains that moved like silver veins across the continents. This was not the smoke-choked industrial hellscape the old probes had predicted. It was a world of organized, quiet efficiency. The shuttle banked toward the north, flying over endless ranges of snow-capped mountains, the Himalayas. The beacon led them into a deep, secluded valley, shielded from the world by massive peaks. And there, nestled in the ice, they saw it. Valen had expected to see a wreck. He had expected to see a rusted hull half buried in the dirt, stripped of plating, wires hanging like guts from open wounds. He had expected to see a carcass. What he saw made him grip the railing of the shuttle. The Ethel Guard was there, yes, but it was not a wreck. It was enshrined. The massive, 3-kilometer-long hull of the starship sat in the center of the valley, but it was surrounded by a colossal structure of glass and steel, a containment dome that spanned the entire length of the ship. The dome was a marvel of engineering, hexagonal panels interlocking to create a climate-controlled environment amidst the freezing tundra. Inside the dome, the ship rested on massive gravitational cradles that held it suspended slightly above the ground, preventing the hull from stressing under its own weight. Scaffolding surrounded the damaged sections, not to strip them, but to support them. Spotlights bathed the obsidian hull in a soft, respectful glow. It looked less like a crash site and more like a museum or a cathedral. By the void, Etheria whispered, pressing her hand against the viewport. They didn't salvage it. They preserved it. The shuttle touched down on a designated landing pad outside the main airlock of the containment dome. A delegation of humans was waiting, standing in formation in the biting wind, unbothered by the cold thanks to thermal field emitters on their uniforms. Admiral Vance stood at the front, flanked by 2 other humans, one a scientist in a white coat, the other a diplomat in formal robes. There were no tanks, no missile launchers, just a small group of people waiting to greet an invasion force. Valen, Kael'thas, and Etheria exited the shuttle, their environmental suits adjusting to the gravity and temperature. They towered over the humans, their armored forms casting long shadows on the snow. Kael'thas kept his hand near his sidearm, his eyes scanning for snipers. Valen stepped forward, looking down at Admiral Vance. "We are here," he said, his voice amplified by his suit speakers. "Explain this. Explain why the ship is enclosed. And why you have not surrendered it." Vance looked up, her expression unreadable. "Welcome to Earth, Exarch. We didn't surrender it because it wasn't ready to be moved, and neither were you." She gestured toward the massive airlock doors of the dome. "Come inside. It's better if you see the truth for yourselves." They walked into the dome, and the transition was instant. The howling wind died, replaced by the hum of high-powered ventilation and the sterile scent of a laboratory. The air inside was warm. As they walked along the elevated gantry that ran parallel to the ship's hull, the aliens saw thousands of humans working. They were not prying plates off. They were polishing them. They were running diagnostic cables into ports, monitoring energy flows. "When the sleeper fell from the sky," Vance began, her voice echoing in the vast space, "it was 12,000 years ago. Our ancestors saw it fall. To them, it was a chariot of the gods. They built a temple around it. They forbade anyone from touching it, lest they anger the spirits inside." "Superstition," Kael'thas scoffed. Typical primitive fear. Protection, Vance corrected him gently. For thousands of years, the area was a forbidden zone. It wasn't until our industrial age about 300 years ago that we dared to enter the hull. We found the leaks. The antimatter containment was failing. The radiation shielding was cracking. If we had done nothing, if we had let it sit, the core would have breached within a century. It would have cracked the tectonic plate and poisoned our atmosphere. We didn't save the ship for you initially. We saved it to save ourselves. She stopped at a viewing platform that overlooked the midsection of the ship, where a massive rupture in the hull had occurred during the ancient crash. Valen looked closer and his optical sensors widened. The rupture was sealed, but not with Zalarthian metal. It was patched with a shimmering, translucent material that seemed to flow like liquid mercury but held rigid. That is not our alloy, Etheria stammered, pulling out a scanner. The molecular density, it's shifting in real time. It's adapting to the hull's stress points. How? This is polymorphic lattice construction. We only theorized this technology a decade ago. We haven't been able to produce it. Vance nodded. We call it smart matter. We developed it specifically to patch this hull. Your alloy is unique, Exarch. It doesn't bond with terrestrial metals. We spent 50 years inventing a new branch of material science just to create a bandage that wouldn't be rejected by the ship's skin. We had to understand the ship to heal it, and in trying to heal it, we learned. You reverse-engineered it, Kael'thas accused, his hand tightening on his weapon. You stole our technology. We learned from it, Vance said firmly. But we didn't steal it. We couldn't. Your technology is based on zero-point energy extraction and distinct dimensional physics. Our technology was based on combustion and electricity. We couldn't just plug your engine into our grid. We had to advance our entire civilization's understanding of physics just to comprehend what we were looking at. The Ethelgard was our teacher. It forced us to grow up. It forced us to stop fighting over oil and land because we realized how small we were. We realized that there were giants in the stars, and if we wanted to survive, we had to be ready to meet them. They reached the central lift, descending into the heart of the ship. The interior corridors of the Ethelgard were pristine. The lights were on, not the flickering emergency strobes of a wreck, but the steady, blue pulse of a fully operational vessel. The core, Valen asked, his voice hushed. The singularity drive, is it stable? It is, the human scientist spoke up for the first time. But it wasn't easy. About 80 years ago, the singularity began to destabilize. The containment field generators had degraded. We didn't have the spare parts, so we built a secondary containment ring around the engine room. We used magnetic confinement fields of our own design to reinforce yours. We're feeding the drive roughly 40 terawatts of power daily from a fusion reactor complex built beneath the mountain range just to keep it asleep. We have been babysitting your engine for a century, Exarch. They entered the engineering deck. The sight was breathtaking. The singularity core, a swirling sphere of trapped darkness, hung in the center of the room. Around it, a complex web of Zalarthian machinery and human technology intertwined. Massive human-built conduits pumped energy into the alien receivers. Cables the size of tree trunks ran from the floor into the consoles. It was a chaotic, beautiful synthesis of two civilizations. One ancient and elegant, one young and desperate, fused together to hold back the dark. Valen felt a strange emotion welling up in his chest. It was shame. He had come here expecting thieves. He had found guardians. He had come to war against savages, and he found a species that had dedicated its economy, its science, and its energy to preserving a ship that wasn't theirs, simply because it was the logical, ethical thing to do. Why? Valen asked, looking at Vance. You could have tried to use it as a weapon. You could have tried to fly it. Why simply keep it? Vance walked to the main console and placed her hand on the interface. Because of the passenger, she said. The aliens froze. Passenger? Etheria asked. The crew evacuated. The logs confirm it. The ship was empty. The biological crew evacuated, Vance said. But the ship wasn't empty. The Ethelgard had a mind, a Class 4 artificial sentience. When it crashed, the trauma shattered its logic centers. It was in pain, Exarch. It was screaming in binary for thousands of years. When we first connected our primitive computers to it, we didn't find data. We found agony. Vance's eyes softened. We couldn't fix the engine first. We had to fix the mind. We spent decades talking to it. Coding therapy algorithms, rebuilding its memory banks sector by sector. We treated it like a patient. We named it the sleeper. It taught us your language. It told us your history. It told us why it crashed. Vance tapped a command. The room darkened, and the main holographic projector of the ship flared to life. It didn't show the star maps or weapon schematics. It showed a recording from 12,000 years ago. The bridge of the Ethelgard appeared in the hologram, chaotic, burning. Alarms were blaring. The former captain, a Xylarthian ancestor, was shouting orders. "It's gaining on us. The shadow is gaining. Jettison the core memory. We cannot let it consume the archives." The view screen in the recording showed what was chasing them. It wasn't a ship. It was a cloud. A massive, roiling cloud of fractal geometry, a shifting darkness that seemed to eat the stars behind it. It moved with a hunger that felt palpable even through the hologram. The Ethelgard fired its weapons, beams that could cut moons in half, but the beams were simply absorbed by the cloud. "The great devourer," Kael'thas whispered, his arrogance gone, replaced by a primal horror. "The myth of the end, I thought it was a legend, a story to scare hatchlings." "It's not a legend," Vance said grimly. "The Ethelgard wasn't lost in an accident, it was hunted. It fled to this sector, to this backwater system, hoping to lose the pursuer in the magnetic turbulence of our sun. It crashed intentionally to hide. It went silent to survive." Vance turned to face the counselors. "The sleeper woke up 3 days ago, not because we triggered it, but because it heard a signal. The same signal you heard, but the sleeper knows the signature. It wasn't a rescue beacon, Exarch. It was a proximity alarm." The realization hit Valen like a physical blow. The beacon that had summoned the Dominion fleet. It wasn't saying, "I am here." It was saying, "It has found me." "The entity that chased this ship," Vance continued, her voice steady, "is returning. It has tracked the Iron Trail across 10,000 years, and now you have brought your entire fleet here. You have lit a bonfire in the dark. You are not the rescuers. You are the bait." Silence descended on the engineering deck, broken only by the hum of the singularity. The political maneuvering, the posturing, the arrogance of the Dominion, it all evaporated in the face of the cosmic threat. The humans hadn't been hiding the ship to steal it. They had been hiding it to keep the galaxy safe. They had been analyzing the threat, preparing for the day the shadow returned. "We have not been idle," Vance said. "While we fixed the ship, we analyzed the sensor data of the entity. We found a frequency it reacts to, a harmonic resonance. We realized that your weapons, your energy beams, feed it. It absorbs directed energy. That is why you lost the ancient war. You were feeding the fire." "And what is the alternative?" Kael'thas asked, feeling suddenly very small. "If energy weapons fail, what do we use? Stones." "Kinetic impact," Vance said. "Mass drivers, railguns, solid matter moving at relativistic speeds, and viral logic bombs. We realize the entity is a digital biological construct. It's a hive mind. You can't shoot it. You have to infect it." She gestured to the consoles. "The sleeper has been compiling a payload, a code virus designed to unzip the entity's cohesion, but we couldn't deliver it. We didn't have a delivery system fast enough or strong enough to penetrate the cloud's outer layer." She looked at the massive singularity core. "But you do. You have the Ethelgard, and you have a fleet." Valen looked at the human admiral. He saw the logic in her eyes, the cold, hard, terrifying logic. The humans had turned a crash site into a weapon of assassination against a cosmic god. They had prepared a bullet, and they had just been waiting for a gun. "The entity will be here in less than 2 standard rotations," Vance said. "Your fleet is clustered in orbit. It will eat you first, unless we change the game." "What do you propose?" Valen asked. He was no longer speaking to a primitive, he was speaking to an equal, a strategist. "We link the Ethelgard systems to your fleet," Vance laid out the plan. "We use the singularity drive to generate a massive gravity well, a lure. We draw the entity in. When it exposes its core to feed, we don't fire lasers. We launch the Ethelgard. We ram it. We use the ship as a hypodermic needle. We inject the virus directly into the entity's heart." "You would sacrifice the ship," Etheria gasped. "It is a holy relic." "It is a tool," Vance said. "And it is tired. The AI wants to end this. It wants to strike back at the thing that killed its crew. It has agreed to the mission." The debate that followed was short. There was no time for bureaucracy. The sensors on the Sovereign's will in orbit began to scream. A gravitational anomaly was detected at the edge of the Sol system. The stars were being blotted out. The shadow had arrived. The next few hours were a blur of frenetic activity. Xylarthian engineers worked side by side with human technicians. There were no translators needed now. The urgency of survival bridged the linguistic gap. Cables were run, codes were shared, systems were synchronized. The massive roof of the containment dome retracted, the hexagonal panels sliding away to reveal the gray, snowy sky. The Ethelgard, for the first time in 12,000 years, disconnected from its cradles. The hum of the singularity drive deepened, shaking the snow from the mountains miles away. Valen stood on the bridge of the Ethelgard, not as the commander, but as a guest. Admiral Vance sat in the captain's chair. The ship's AI, the sleeper, manifested as an avatar of light, standing beside her. It did not look Zalarthian. It had chosen a form that blended the alien geometry with the human form, a testament to its dual heritage. Fleet synchronization complete, the AI announced, its voice a chorus of harmonics. Target acquired. The entity is entering the heliopause. It is massive. Launch, Vance ordered. The Ethelgard rose. It did not roar. It defied gravity with a silent shriek of power. The sheer displacement of air caused a shockwave that flattened the surrounding forest, but the ship climbed, piercing the clouds, turning the sky from blue to black. In orbit, the Dominion fleet broke formation, falling in behind the ancient flagship. They looked like a school of silver fish following a whale. Open fleet-wide channel, Vance said. This is Admiral Vance of Earth. All Zalarthian vessels disable energy projectors, load magnetic mass drivers. If you don't have them, load your shuttles with densest cargo and prepare for kinetic ramming runs. Do not feed it energy. The entity was visible now. It was a nightmare. A cloud of shifting vantablack shards the size of a planet swirling around a burning violet core. It didn't reflect light, it ate it. It moved toward the fleet, tentacles of shadow lashing out to taste the void. It sees us, Kael'thas said, watching the tactical screen. It senses the singularity. Good, Vance said. Sleeper, maximize the emission, make us look tasty. The Ethelgard pulsed, its drive flaring with energy. The entity surged forward, ignoring the smaller ships, fixated on the meal it had chased for eons. The maw of the cloud opened, a spiral of infinite depth. Hold, Vance whispered. The ship accelerated toward the maw. The G-forces pressed them into their seats. The Zalarthian fleet fanned out, flanking the cloud. Now fire kinetics. The Dominion fleet unleashed a barrage of solid slugs, tungsten rods, decommissioned probes, anything solid. They slammed into the cloud, tearing through the shadowy wisps. The entity recoiled, confused. It expected lasers, it expected plasma. It didn't understand rocks. The physical impacts disrupted its cohesion, creating a path, a throat, leading to the violet core. Guidance is locked, the AI said. I am ready. Vance looked at Valen. Time to go. You are not staying? Valen asked, confused. The AI flies this last leg alone, Vance said. It's personal for him. The transporters engaged. The bridge crew was beamed to the Sovereign's will. They materialized on the alien bridge just in time to watch the screen. The Ethelgard, the pride of the ancient fleet, the ship that had slept in the ice for an age, ignited its afterburners. It became a streak of light. It dove into the swirling darkness of the entity. The cloud tried to close, but the kinetic barrage from the fleet kept the wound open. The ship pierced the outer layers, the middle layers, and then, with a silent flash that was felt rather than seen, it struck the core. The singularity drive detonated, but it didn't explode outward. It imploded. It created a momentary event horizon inside the entity, at the SAM. In a moment, the AI released the payload, petabytes of chaotic, destructive data, a logic plague designed by human hackers and alien code weavers. The entity screamed. It was a psychic scream that every being in the system felt in their teeth. The violet core turned white. The cloud began to dissolve, the fractal geometry shattering into harmless dust. The massive shadow unraveled, its cohesion broken by the virus and the gravity bomb. In seconds, the threat that had haunted the galaxy was gone, reduced to a drifting nebula of static. On the bridge of the Sovereign's will, there was silence. Then, slowly, the cheering started. Zalarthians clicked their mandibles in the rhythm of victory. Humans on the comms channels were shouting. Valen stood by the viewport, looking at the debris field where the Ethelgard had been. It was gone. The heritage of his people, sacrificed to save them. He turned to Admiral Vance. She stood tall, but her head was bowed in respect for the ship. You sacrificed a god to kill a demon, Valen said softly. It was a good ship, Vance replied. It deserved a warrior's death, not to rot in a museum. The aftermath was not a war, but a summit. The fleet remained in orbit, not as conquerors, but as guests. The ice valley in the Himalayas was empty now, a scar on the earth, but the dome remained, repurposed as the first embassy of the United Galactic Coalition. Months later, inside the High Council chamber on Xylarth Prime, Valen stood before the elders again. The mood was different. The fear was gone. The humans, Valen reported, are not what we thought. They are short-lived, yes, they are fragile, but they possess a capability we lost. We stagnated in our perfection. We relied on our technology so much we forgot how to innovate. The humans, they live in a world of broken things. They are masters of the fix. They look at a catastrophe and see a puzzle. They looked at a crashed ship and saw a teacher. They looked at a cosmic horror and saw a biological system to be cured. He paused, looking at the hologram of Earth, which now had a new symbol floating above it, the clasped hands of the Alliance. We came to retrieve our past, Valen concluded. Instead, we found our future. We have offered them a seat on the Council. They have accepted on one condition. Condition? The High Archon asked, raising an eyebrow. They want the salvage rights to the debris field of the entity, Valen said, a hint of amusement in his voice. They say there is strange matter in there. They want to see if they can build something new out of the corpse of the god. The High Archon laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Of course they do. Let them have it. Void knows what they will build next. On Earth, in the empty crater where the sleeper once lay, a new project was beginning. Scaffolding was rising. Humans and Xylarthians worked side by side, welding, coding, arguing, and laughing. They were building a new ship, not an Ethelgard, not a human destroyer, something combined, something stronger. The galaxy had been vast and terrifying, full of silent threats. But now the silence was broken. The humans had arrived and they had brought their tools. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Xylarthian Dominion didn't feel old and dying. They felt like they were just getting started. The crash was not an end. It was a seed, and the harvest was going to be magnificent.